Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with thought leader and award-winning author Yvette Bethel. This podcast provides you with insights and ideas you can use to reinvent your culture through trust and the principles of interconnectivity, flow, and balance. At a time when the world is rewriting the rules of work, traditional leadership practices are not enough. It's time to perceive persistent challenges through a new lens. It's time to evolve. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Evolve. This is your host, Yvette Bethel, along with Edwin Clamp. Please back. Edwin, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And this is our little special Future of Leadership series, and the topic for this episode is navigating tensions in the workplace, keeping organizations in balance and change. So, Edwin, you want to say you're no stranger? You want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Edwin Clamp. I've done a lot of work over the years looking at things through different lenses, particularly the quantum worldview, but also comparing that to different worldviews. And Yvette and I have worked together for years now. We love to dialogue about interesting ideas. So this is one of them. I think tension is one of those fundamental kind of conceptual principles that I keep coming back to, like where's the tension in the system? So I'm excited to talk about this today.
Mm-hmm. So welcome back. This is our fifth. I think this is our fifth call, right? In the series.
Yes.
So we're really moving along here. So thanks for sticking with our series. Now, a while ago, I saw a book called The Three Tensions. I can't remember the name of the author, but he highlighted three tensions that you need to pay attention to in organizations. But I find that there's so many tensions in an organization, and each organization has its own goals strategically, and they have their own values, what they value in terms of the core values that drive culture, that you can't pick three tensions that apply to everybody. That's my take on it. Yes, the three, I think one is like short-term versus long-term and a few others, but profitability versus something. I can't remember what the three tensions are, but certainly they may be important, but they may not be, the top tensions that an organization may choose to pay attention to. So I think this conversation is more about figuring out what are your, critical tensions. And I guess we could start by talking about what tensions are within an organization, and then how to kind of identify them. So your turn.
Right. Okay, yeah. So I think, yes, three tensions seems a bit reductionistic. I agree with you. There are many tensions. And as I look at things, like I just said, one of the recurrent questions I have is what are the tensions? And usually when you look at pretty much any dynamic in an organization, so a plethora of different situations, you can identify multiple tensions. So this kind of goes to your point. There are many, many, many tensions. I think one of the important places for me to start in my thinking is to recognize that we have these fundamental ways of looking at things. The classical ways that we are taught to think, it tends to focus in on very static conceptualizations of organizations. And when you're talking about tension, you're really talking about something that's dynamic. So I think it's helpful to kind of like to set the stage in this discussion to say that organizations are organic living systems, they're ecosystems, or whatever the kind of the biological word you want to use. Organisms, organization obviously comes from the word organism. So we're talking about these very, very complicated biological systems that are made up of humans, and they tend to organize in ways that reflect the biological nature. So in nature, we see that there are tensions um, that exist that are held in balance. And we'll often use the term homeostasis to describe that balance of systems. So obviously human beings have many different parameters that we're talking about when we talk about our biological homeostasis. We could be talking about body temperature or glucose levels or heart rate. I mean, there's just a number of different factors. So again, we're talking about many factors. And so then when we are examining a organization, we need to, just like a doctor would, look at a person and evaluate which parameters of their homeostasis are relevant to the situation that they're trying to understand. We need to look at organizations and say, okay, what's going on in the organization? What are the parameters or the tensions within this situation that are relevant to whatever we're trying to understand? So it could be an established organization that's having a hard time adapting to a changing environment, or a change in leadership may bring about new tensions in an organization or whatever. But really, it becomes very contextually dependent, kind of on the big picture, the external environment and how we're responding to it, as to which tensions in an organization are something that we should be considering. So, once we kind of set the groundwork with that, I think it's really important to understand what it means when we talk about tension. Really, what it's describing is the pull of two contradictory forces.
That's right.
And we can see, I mean, they abound in organizations. So, for example, retention versus pay. People will leave an organization if they can go somewhere else to get better pay. Now, obviously, like we said, there are many other factors, right? So when you're looking at retention as an issue, you could be looking at a plethora of factors, but one of those could be that pay tension. Like, well, if we pay people more, we retain them, and then our profitability goes down, blah, blah, blah. So there's always these kind of balancing, these homeostatic points that we're trying to find the balance within the organization. And we have to recognize, what are the two forces at play that intersect at that point, and how are they, in a sense, they're pulling each other. It's like a tug of war, basically, right? And we need to see that these two forces they create this tension in this tug of war. And depending on the dynamics of those two often opposite forces, it can shift that center point or the set point of that dynamic. And in biological systems, we'll often talk about like set points, for example, like our body temperature has a set point. We're maintaining the balance between creating heat within ourselves, which we do as warm-blooded animals, and our ability to dissipate the heat so that we're not overheating, sweating, etc., etc. And our body's continually trying to use these two opposite forces, generating heat and dissipating heat, to maintain that set point. And sometimes when we are facing challenges, then we need to look at that dynamic and whether or not we need to make changes in that dynamic. Does that make sense, Yvette?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of break it down a bit, because you've
Mm-hmm.
introduced a whole lot of conceptual topics.
Yes. Yes, I have.
And
I tend to do that.
I
Mm-hmm.
want to just help people to make it real. So you're right. It's about pulling forces. They're pulling in away from each other in
Right.
opposite directions. And you named a few. I think you have many tensions that can happen in an organization. One can be the lack of transparency versus the need for transparency. You can have
Great example, yes.
aggressive deadlines versus burnout. These
Yes,
these
right?
are real kind of uh, day-to-day issues that create a tension, that creates a buildup because there's no outlet for people in some organizations, and others, they're very good at it, and they create the outlets
Hmm.
and allow the valve to be
Hmm.
released. But in many organizations, as you correctly said, you can have multiple layers of these tensions. So you can have the lack of low transparency, high control. That's another form of tension with aggressive
Yes,
deadlines and burnout. So
yes,
now we're talking layers, layers of these tensions, as you said, and I'm just bringing it to life for the listeners. And so what happens is these things are happening all simultaneously. This isn't linear. It is, you know, non-linear. It's all overlapping,
yes,
overlaid, a hodgepodge, and people feel ah, and this
yes,
is why people quietly quit because it's hard to like pull it apart and help people by systematically addressing root causes because they're all interconnected. That's the other thing. That's what happens with tension.
yes,
They have like a domino
right.
effect. You could like, cause one and then multiple things start to fall.
Yes, absolutely.
I think an example of that would be um, you have people that are incompetent, and that leads to unhealthy communication because now they're not being transparent. But that incompetence is facing aggressive deadlines, so deadlines are not being met. So you see how each tension now is impacting another tension and another tension um, as you move through. So there's a nodal or connectivity that happens um, with these tensions that leaders need to pay attention to. You have to be aware of your
Right,
tensions. And it might be as simple as someone not talking to somebody on your team, and understanding the climate, like what's going on. And because a lot of
right, right.
times people even ignore that level and it's not a low level because emotions are real. They dictate the
Hmm.
climate, and the climate impacts engagement. So
Yes,
it's what I'm trying to do is break it down into, language that HR, operations manager, whoever's listening, business owner, they get it. These are tensions that and I need to address them. I guess the big question now is why? Why should they pay attention?
yes. So I think right there, what you were describing of that is maybe attention in itself, because I, as you pointed out, I tend to get very conceptual in how I talk about things. But when we're talking about this, as you describe it, we're talking about complexity.
That's
We're
right.
not talking about simplicity. We have a ton of things that are happening. We're talking about interconnectivity, which is a quantum property. We're talking about butterfly effects that a small thing can
Mm-hmm.
can blow up into a big thing. We're talking about non-linearity there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not dealing with linear cause and effect.
Mm-mm.
We're dealing with what we would call in quantum thinking the observer effect. That when I bring my attention to something in the organization, other things change.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I think why would we look at this through a quantum lens? Because we are dealing with complexity, and if you're approaching complexity with simplicity, you're going to be missing things,
Yeah.
and you're not going to be getting to the heart of the issue. So you'll constantly be kind of uh, trying to fix things with the wrong approach, basically.
Yeah, I think
Um,
what you're saying is if you try to address complexity with simplicity, you end up uh, addressing things superficially. So
yes.
the surface kinds of issues that you can see
Hmm.
typically will be the simple approach to it, but then the root causality uh,
Yes.
remains in place so that it will emerge again. It will emerge again. People say,
Right. And so we
okay.
can see this, we've likened this to the biological system, the organism. I mean, we can see this kind of the problem with this kind of thinking in medicine, where doctors will treat the symptoms and not the root cause of the disease process, and it tends to just mask the disease process, and you're not actually bringing health back to the person. You're just masking what the problem is with by treating the symptoms. So obviously, if you're engaged with them, if you're an engaged leader in your organization, you want it to be healthy, and so we need to be ready to step into that complex thinking. Um, Now, how does the leader do that? I think that's the next question. Is like,
Mhm.
how do we do that? And I think this is where we need to first go back to the question of what is the tension. And I think my personal experience has been, when I see things in organizations that don't make sense to me, I have recognized I have to step back and ask myself, what is really going on here? Because things are the way they are for reasons. And often we look at things and we're not recognizing the actual dynamic. We're looking at it through the lens of how they should be. Um, for example, if you have uh, this very weird process in an organization that, like, it just doesn't make sense, it's probably that way for a reason. Uh, why is it that way? That's the first tension we have to identify. What is the benefit that this odd situation is actually bringing to the organization? And I sometimes I think that's the hard part, is just to see the tension. Like, what is it really? Not what it should be, or ideologically, or what have we been taught in MBA school that it is. What is it actually?
Yeah. And seeing the tension, um, sometimes what I do with my clients is we look for behaviors and clusters of behaviors, and they start to, and attitudes and things like that, and they start to point to the tension. Um, I tend to lean more toward um, qualitative data capture than
Mm-hmm.
quantitative, because it can go in any direction, and it wouldn't be some prescribed direction that may have nothing to do with some of what's going on. Like I can take the same questions and get completely different answers if I don't, narrow the
Right.
options. For example,
Yes.
in one case, I did some research with a client, and it turned out that they have some anomalies around communicating and decision making. But with the same questionnaire with another client, rackets and theft and other things came out because they were open enough to allow for what's really going on to come into
Yes.
the center stage. So,
Yeah. So,
mhm,
and I think that's the tricky part, is there are these under the surface things that are happening in organizations, the informal things that are not talked about. We see this in organizational psychology, that if
mhm,
you're looking at an organization from this kind of naive point of view, you're missing a lot. You have to be looking under the surface. And like, an example of what I was talking about is an organization that I was aware of, a big manufacturing organization. They had a very antiquated quality system that was all paper based.
mhm,
And anybody who would come in there who was educated, had an MBA, whatever, the first thing that they would do would be like, "Oh, we need to modernize this. This is very inefficient. This is ridiculous. How this all the
mhm.
quality data is all on paper." And every time that happened, that initiative failed. and any
I,
initiatives around that
I can
failed.
tell
Like
that.
another one was there was a piece of equipment they used to test a very important quality parameter, and they were using an old piece of equipment. They came in, they spent a few $100,000 to replace the equipment, and a week later, it was literally thrown in the dumpster, and they went back to the old equipment. Well, what was actually happening there was that antiquated paper-based system was a way for them to manage the the lack of quality. They weren't managing the quality. It's
Corruption. Yeah.
anytime anything sketchy was happening, they
That's
could
it.
go back and replace the paper, make sure it all looked perfect.
Right.
And if you put a digital system in there
The
where that
digital
it has
trail.
all the things that the best practices, like you know tracking who's logging in, who's changing the data, all of that, they weren't able to do that anymore, right?
That's
So
right.
you look at this thing and you're like, why is it this way? Well, it's this way because there was a tension there and there was a benefit on the other side of the tension. In this case,
Yeah.
they were shipping product that was subpar, but the paperwork
Did
was
not
always
respect.
perfect because they could doctor the paperwork.
But then, yeah,
So I
and you're
think,
right. But I think you should explain that tension very clearly because there's a variance between what was being recorded in the, I guess, the fake paperwork versus
yes.
the real paperwork. And then you have now a customer tension, and you probably have multiple internal tensions
Oh, yes.
out of that as well,
Right.
because the
And
staff can see it.
yeah, yes. And that is a perfect example of the butterfly effect where a small thing starts to radiate out and cause other consequences. So in a case like that, you would have customers who would get upset and say, well, our product wasn't in spec. And the manufacturer is saying, well, our paperwork shows it was, and therefore we're not gonna take this product back. You need to pay for it. So there's money in there, but then that tension is like, then you got an unhappy customer and then they leave, right? And
Mhm.
then you have
There's another tension with
employees
profitability and revenue.
profitability, right? Uh, then you have another one with employees who are engaged in this and they feel bad about what they're doing because they know it's wrong, and eventually they leave. So you have some turnover, and of course, a part of that is the people who are engaged in this and are feeling comfortable. They're not the best people for your organization because they're okay with a little bit of fraud, right? So now, all of a sudden, now you're starting to shift your organizational culture to people who aren't going to be honest with the
That's
organization.
it.
And
That's
they're
it.
like, well, if I can commit fraud here, I can commit fraud there.
But
And so,
you're making an important point because what's happened is the tension started to shift the culture in a direction that is not desirable by the owners
yes,
or the executives. And so incrementally,
right.
it becomes something different. That's very important. That's
Yeah.
a very important understanding that we people need to have or the listeners need to have of tensions. They can actually shift your culture.
Yes, and so if we're using this biological language like our body temperature, what ends up happening is the organization will reach a new set point where this is the normative behavior in this parameter. And once, as we know, like as I know, I've been on my weight loss journey, I reached a certain weight and I kind of stuck there. And it's been really hard for me to change my body system
Mhm.
to find a new set point. So what we see is this is where you kind of get this recalcitrant cultures. It's like you just can't change them,
It's
and you have
I
leader
don't
and
think
after
it's
leader coming
recalcitrant.
in.
I don't think it's recalcitrant though. I think
Mm,
living systems have a propensity that they're elastic. And so once you slowly move to a new set point where the corruption is acceptable, that becomes the set point. And if you try to move it quickly, it'll just snap back. It snaps back because it's living.
yes, yes.
And that's what
Well,
it does.
well, I
But
think that's the essence of the concept of homeostasis is once the organism establishes that set point, it's going to work really, really hard to maintain
Maintain
that
it.
set point,
So
which is where the stasis part of the word comes from. It's like
it's
it's static. It's the
self-preserving.
same root as yeah, it's the same root as static. So
Hmm.
once you get to that place, your organization kind of becomes static at that point, and then it becomes while the organization obviously has the ability to adapt because it shifted that way, it becomes more challenging to then shift it back to the right
Yeah,
place again,
you got it.
particularly because when we're talking about the kind of the ripple effect or the butterfly effect, that one thing is actually interconnected to everything else. So you're no longer just trying to shift one thing, you're trying to shift many things. And that
And
becomes, again, we come back to complexity, right? You've got to be dealing with the complexity to do that.
and I think you're absolutely right because the one thing is connected, and also something else happened within the ecosystem is the mindsets, the core values, the
Mm-hmm.
assumptions, the beliefs all shifted. And I believe that every ecosystem has a set of anchors. So what
Mm-hmm.
they've done is through the incremental changes to moving toward corruption and bringing in people that are okay with it,
Mm-hmm.
shifted the deep kinds of fixations within the culture and ecosystem. So now if you try to pull away, that's the set point, as you said earlier,
Yes.
but you can't, you have to just how you got there incrementally, you got to move back
Right.
incrementally and deliberately. Otherwise, they're going to, the system turns on, it can turn on a person
Yes.
if you try to
Yeah. And
move it faster than it's willing to go, because it has a rhythm.
yeah, it does. And I think you mentioned a case with with two of your clients where one was willing to be honest and things were surfaced and the other one was dealing with the questionnaire on a superficial level. I think that becomes then the task incumbent upon leadership is to cultivate the environment where those kind of feedback loops where we're starting to actually talk about things openly and honestly, where that communication is starting to take place on that level and the dialogues are starting to take place, that is probably the first step in shifting it because you can't shift something that you're not acknowledging exists, right?
Yeah. I mean, you still have people in a situation like that saying, our core values are teamwork, trust, and integrity. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, it's a bit tongue in cheek, but often that's one of the clues that I will tap into is when you go into an organization and you that clearly has problems and you listen to their espoused values using Edgar Schein's organizational behavior language. What are their espoused values? What are they saying? Those words are often there to mask what is actually happening. So when you're in an organization and they're talking about, you know, we value integrity, it's like, oh, what are you actually telling me there?
You
Maybe
think,
it's aspirational. Maybe they
yeah,
know they need
I think it's
to
more aspirational because what happens with those
yeah.
core values, they start out as aspirational when the company starts
Mm-hmm.
and they never really
Yeah.
change it, even though the culture and the systems beneath the culture shift and what's behind it.
Right.
Because
Yes.
in fact, I don't even think they are willing to accept that the new core values are
Mm-hmm.
low transparency, silencing people when they tell them you stay in your lane. That's it.
Yes.
You stay in your lane. That's valued. And that's part of them maintaining their new
Yes.
ecosystem.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think we all know that like it's very hard for people to maintain a lie because it gets very complicated to continue to patch this break, this leaking boat. And things like encouraging a low trend or shifting the organization, stay in your lane,
But it's not a
low
lie, though.
transparency kind of. What's that?
It's not always a lie. It starts out with some kind of justification. It's
Of course,
always
yeah.
incremental, so they feel like it isn't a lie. They condition themselves because it's justified. Well, we need to do more
Of
for our
course it is.
staff, and
Yeah, even
things like that.
even on a leadership level, it's like I can't take this hit because I'm going to lay off 50 people if I if I'm completely, uh, ethical in the situation. It's just a small thing. So I'm doing this for my staff. I'm doing it, yes, everything's can always be justified in the minds. But
But
like
that's
you
the
said, it's
incremental process.
incremental.
It's the
Yeah,
justification that's incremental.
right. And so I think again we come back to the responsibility of leadership is there to really model the values that need to exist in organizations so that they can tackle and address and have honest conversations about those tensions. And that is something that I think a lot of leaders really honestly struggle with because they have been promoted into those roles based on very limited number of metrics. Like this guy knows how to make this company profitable. One data point, not like this guy knows how to make companies healthy. That's usually not how those people get in those roles, unless they're founders. They tend to have a different point of view often.
Now, we've been talking for almost 40 minutes, so I want to just share or have a quick conversation about, what can people do to be more attuned to, because you talked about homeostasis at the beginning, and organizations have two choices. You can allow the system to find its own set points, or you can be deliberate about understanding the system and you define the set points. And there's this third option where a combination of the two happen because you can't find every single set point. You're not going to go after every single tension. You're going to go after
Right.
the critical ones. So from your perspective, what how do they make this work? How do they find, because it's a dynamic balancing situation, how do they help with that and be more deliberate about it? And it's it it's a system literacy
Right.
building.
Yeah, I think the two things that are coming to mind most are one is mastery of communication, and by that I'm not necessarily meaning like speaking or writing. I'm meaning more listening, paying attention to what people are saying, making sure you have as many feedback mechanisms in the organization. Going back to a manufacturing setting, if you're the leader and you're in your office on the 10th floor and you never ever walk through the shop floor, you're depriving yourself of feedback there.
Yeah,
So one is to maximize the number of uh, informational streams that you're getting so that you can pick up on things when they seem a little bit off. So that's the first thing is really that receptive communication, and also part of that is being a good listener. And in a sense, when people bring difficult things to you, being non-judgmental and listening without consequences for the news bearer.
yeah,
So that kind of communication thing is really really important there. I think another thing which we can take out of the quantum worldview, and it's an adaptation of traditional management technique, is you manage what you measure, and that's very data driven, and there's truth to that. But we can reframe that general management thing as the observer effect. When you bring your attention onto something, it will change. that thing. So this is in physics, quantum physics, as an observer effect. When you look at a wave, it changes into a particle. But when you're a leader and you're bringing your attention to things within the organization, people will naturally downregulate the behaviors that they're engaging in that they don't want to be seen. And so that is something that you can use as a tool that when you're examining your organization, is like, why will this department or this division, why is it so resistant to change? We've tried numerous initiatives and it's not working. Bring your attention to it. Be present. Talk to people. I mean, however you need to do it, and that can be many different approaches.
When there's corruption, I find that people will talk. The ones who don't talk are the ones who are benefiting from it. The ones who do talk are the ones who are not getting anything from it. And they're sick of it.
Right.
And so they will say something.
Yes.
They will say something. You
Right,
just have to ask the right people and not marginalize people because of some bias toward them. Listen.
Right.
I think you're spot on with
And
that.
I think we also need to recognize in the traditional MBA mindset, managing what you measure, when you hold people accountable to the single metric, profitability or productivity or whatever it is, you are forcing them to perform just that to that one point, and they're not able to balance the other things, all the other things that encompass the health of the organization.
I'm not
So we have
fan
to
of over management in this model.
right.
I think this model needs more freedom.
Right.
So to me, like I interviewed someone on my podcast the other day. He was talking about the no policy policy. And what he's done is he has an organization where there are absolutely no policies, but he has structures and systems in place to take care of it so that it doesn't go, out of whack. So he said
Right.
that, people take as much vacation as they need, but the work has to be done. You got to get your work done. So if you take off like 3 months, you better be working. You better produce.
Yeah. Right.
So it's left up to them and nobody abuses it.
Right. And so what that person has done is they have found a new tension, and
But it's a
they
healthy
have,
tension, and I think we should make
yes,
a distinction because
well,
tensions are
obviously,
not
because
bad. Sorry.
yeah, the word tension, we have this negative connotation, like I'm really tense. But we're talking structurally here. We need those tensions in the systems. We just need healthy tensions, not unhealthy tensions. So yes, it sounds like that person found a healthy tension there, and they're probably getting really, really great benefits from that. And as long as they continue to engage in that kind of observation and listening and feedback to make sure that tension isn't shifting and people aren't starting to abuse it, then they're going to benefit from that. But if they're not doing that deeper listening, watching, communicating, reinforcing, yes, then the organization is going to start to drift back to the old set point, right? So
lots of fun. And with that, I'd like to thank you. We've been talking for 45 minutes. Oh boy.
Okay, great.
This has been cool. Thanks, Edwin, for this episode.
You're welcome.
Evolve. I know that, these are some of the topics leaders don't typically think about. And tensions they are extraordinarily important to understand and navigate and facilitate this. We got to get into facilitating tensions. You want to facilitate people and conversations, we got to facilitate the tensions too. So before we sign off, please let our listeners know where they can connect with you.
Yeah, so again, my name is Edwin Clamp. Easy to find me on LinkedIn. You can send me a message or send me an email at edwin@edwinclamp.com. Thank you, Yvette.
Yes, this has been Yvette Bethel and Edwin Clamp, and we'd like to thank you for joining us at Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures.
Thank you for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Learn more about our proprietary trust, leadership, and culture courses and certifications at the IFB Academy. You can check them out at organizationalsoul.learnworlds.com.